great video. He was always known as the great speaker, and you can hear a couple words in there and a couple phrases that really identify with his great speaking and his liberal identity. Fighting tyranny, a great responsibility, and a proud descendant of 40 million immigrants. And we are a nation of immigrants. You might have heard that before. It's such powerful words, you hear him and say, hey, you know, whatever that guy has to say, I'm with him. And after his tragic death in 1963, those words kind of became legend, repeating endlessly throughout time to the tune of civil rights advocacy in any case. These words sparked action within the people, and from that point you see the legislative support on both sides take a turn to go toward that direction of passing the bill, almost in his honor. You know, it's also most likely, you know, from the people translating to the representatives of the House as they see their executive die, it's a rather powerful symbol to the people more than the legislators. But take all the good aspects of that, and the mass media support for the bill, JFK's famous words, as well as his tragic death for civil rights, as we call it, and the bill's eventual passing, combine them all together, and you get Lyndon B. Johnson's 1964 race for presidential election. LBJ is the president for JFK, and president after his assassination ran for re-election pretty much off of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Sourcing JFK's legacy, his words, the bill as vice president that he supported wholeheartedly, he won in a literal landslide. 61% of the popular vote and 486 out of the electoral votes, compared to Goldwater's 52. Goldwater being the representative, the Republican candidate, for election at that time. I almost feel bad for Goldwater, seeing as he had to go against LBJ, who already had the people's vote with him as JFK's vice president, but at the same time, he had JFK's death in his back pocket at any time, ready to dispel any bad things about him. And really, the death of the commander-in-chief is one of the strongest symbols to the nation and a big motivator for voters. So on to the fourth unit, being the national government, the Congress, the presidency, bureaucracy, and the federal courts. For the fourth unit we learned about, I will keep this one more modern and focus on a very recent action taken by our own president, Mr. Barack Obama, and I speak of the Immigration Accountability Executive Action, or actions, depending on how you look at it. Most of all, you've heard of this, and some of the basic understanding is there, but just in case, President Barack Obama just recently announced a plan to allow millions of immigrants temporary citizenship within the United States, as well as indefinite reprieve from deportation. Now that's roughly 11 million undocumented persons in the States, and coming with citizenship and every benefit that comes with citizenship, ranging from employment to healthcare, and you see how that really got some people mad, to say the least. So, yeah, Republicans already hated the guy. Now he's pretty much stretching every constitutional bound he can find to get this thing passed, and so it's really not grinding well with the Republicans. But before we take any judgment, let's hear what the man has to say. If you listen closely, you could hear some key words that sounded just like something we heard in a video maybe a minute or two ago. JFK. Sorry. You hear a nation of immigrants and all these other terms that relate to the Civil Rights Act that you can really relate to JFK. Is Mr. Obama pulling out a JFK card on us? I'd like to think so, and let's see why that's so effective. Well, for starters, there really are a lot of arguments against Barack Obama's plan, and whether or not he has the constitutional authority and the authority as a representative of the state to do any of those things. So, does he have the power to give temporary administrative relief to undocumented immigrants without granting permanent status or any identity to those people? Well, there's a lot of people that say yes, and more specifically the National Immigration Law Center says yes. The president not only has the power to make such laws, but where and how to enforce them. That's an official quote from the site themselves. All agencies of law enforcement have something called prosecutorial discretion. It's a big word. And the Department of Homeland Security also has the authority to prioritize its research to reach any stated goal. That's written anywhere. It could say, I use this money to this goal, therefore it's legitimate. These two powers, translated to the president as they can be, give him a pretty wide berth of what he can do, and even further than that, he has legislative backfires that he can take in case there's too much opposition, like the veto. So, well, let's see, now that we know support for it, let's see how Congress can actually stop him and on what legal grounds they can do that. So one, let's not forget that Congress does set the budget for the government, and many times not getting their way means not getting a budget and the government shuts down and all that stuff like that. So also the words, a little exquisite wording, like in the 2014 budget for December, the none of the funds was mentioned 460 times throughout the document. With that very exquisite wording, you can deny fully, in clear language, things that are going through. Also, two, a wide majority can override anything in Congress. If Congress was fully united on anything, it would go nowhere. But sadly, as we all know, that is a rather rare occurrence in Congress. So, yeah. Three, it is commonplace to see a wide array of restrictions on documents and laws placed by Congress. It's just normal. It's part of the negotiation process, actually, like, say, for the current budget. Congress placed massive restrictions on the allowance to Homeland Security. As you guys may have heard of, it's become a big issue. And how much they can get and how much is enough came up a lot and threatened the budget's completion altogether. So seeing these possibilities, you see how both sides have tools at the ready and it's just kind of a waiting game for either, waiting for one to make the wrong step of the plan. So that is why the policy, and Mr. Obama's, by policy I mean Mr. Obama's executive action, is such a good thing for Unit 4 to be analyzed under. Because it's constantly, the system's constantly moving back and forth, and all the government institutions checking one another. One institution's going after this goal using this power, and the other one's coming all back again under it to get another power. And you can really see that through this document, you see them furthering their goals, as well as trying to back it with some legislative idea of why they can. So this executive order shows how the executive has evolved and into probably the most powerful branch, if I had to say so. In the planning of the Constitution, the focus was on actually a weak executive, and in the wording, instead of giving powers, they decided to strictly forbid acts by the president. Through wars and other events calling for a more strict and powerful executive, say the Great Depression and other such events that are minor economic depressions, that they need a central executive, they have allowed powers that still persist to this day, and therefore the president, as a member of the, government itself, has become a very, very powerful person with a lot of powers. So the fifth one that we did is civil rights and liberties. This unit was focused around the policy of choice for me being the Emancipation Proclamation, because believe it or not, when Abraham Lincoln emancipated the slaves, he actually created the first group of illegal immigrants in the country, recognized by the document. Think about it. The proclamation only made slavery illegal in the Confederacy, in the southern states that seceded. Therefore, you have a group of people in an area still in war without documentation that they are citizens in any way, because before this Emancipation Proclamation, technically they were property by court case and by law. And so therefore, they have no legal means of citizenship or any way of legally showing that I belong to this country, with the option of being deported at any time because of lack of any documentation. That's crazy, I know. But for the period of time between the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment, every freed slave was a person of American soil lacking any history of noted documentation or legal citizenship in the states. Granted, many that made it north did in fact go through the process of becoming a citizen, and therefore most people that were in the border territories do not apply to this rule, but those that remained in the South, which is actually a large number of them, were technically between the time of the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment, illegal immigrants. So, in conclusion, the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation intentionally or unintentionally, doesn't really matter for this purpose, ended up recognizing the existence of a group of illegal persons present in the nation, and then by connection granting that group inclusionary rights via the Constitution. It's awesome and fits perfectly and really interesting to think about if you haven't thought about that before. So, in conclusion of all this video that you've heard, I really like to thank you for viewing it, and I hope that now you've started to look at immigration as a general policy issue with deep historical roots and constantly evolving ideas. Even to this day, the idea of who's an immigrant and how can they immigrate and naturalization is a debated topic in Congress constantly. And therefore, still to this day, there are ideas of what constitute each, and as American society forms. So we'll really see in the future what immigration becomes, or if immigration itself is just an idea that fades away.